behind that vehicle, but because of the excessive speed, they decided to back off quite a bit. They have the air unit overhead, and they're going to track this vehicle from the air at this point in time and see where this suspect goes. Now, it's hard to tell if there's more than one person inside this vehicle. Looks like the back windows are blackened out, so it's hard for us to really get an idea whether there's more than just the driver. We don't believe so, but certainly that has not been confirmed by any means. We've talked to the Sheriff's Department. They're going to hand this over to CHP on the freeway, but the helicopter is going to continue to follow it overhead. And at this point in time, we've got light traffic on the southbound side of the 5. We're just coming up on the 210, so leaving the Newhall Pass, headed down into the Sylmar area. It doesn't look like the suspect's going to have to deal with any heavy or even moderate traffic, from what I could tell, continuing all the way down really into the Pacoima area, down towards, if they stay on the 5 freeway, down towards even Burbank. At that point in time, though, there's construction on the roadway. We may have some delays in there. But in the immediate future, the short term here, there's no delays on the freeway. We're seeing speeds right now around 90 miles an hour. Once again, we had a report from a CHP unit behind it. The speeds were above 100 miles an hour. It looks to be a Jeep Cherokee, if I'm not mistaken. I'm sure somebody will correct me if it is not. We have a driver on board. Hard to say how many other people on board. And authorities want this individual, wanted, at least as far as we know right now, for an assault on a sheriff's deputy in the Agua Dulce area, then at high speeds on the southbound side of the 5. Right now, if we pull out just a little bit, we'll give you a little perspective, see if we can see if there are any patrol cars right behind the vehicle. There were earlier, now there are not. So you can tell the suspect is driving, 15, 20 miles an hour faster than the flow of traffic. But he doesn't have to swerve in and out of traffic. So even though it's a high-speed pursuit at this point in time, surveillance, if you will, with the helicopter overhead just tracking the vehicle, we're not seeing a lot of dangerous moves by the suspect. So that's good as far as conditions on the freeway are concerned. But these things always get dicey when the suspect gets cornered, trying to figure out exactly what they're going to do or how this thing is going to end. And there you see an immediate turn, and you can see how dangerous things can get very quickly. I think this will be turning onto the 405 freeway southbound, if I'm not mistaken, away from the 5. So now it looks like we're going to head down towards the Van Nuys area, if you will, if the suspect does not get off onto the 118 freeway. We did see an abrupt move there. That was pretty dangerous. Before that point in time, though, we hadn't seen anything really that would give us the indication that we were looking at a driver that was extremely desperate and willing to make just about any move to get away. So the suspect does know the helicopter's overhead. They don't have any patrol cars behind. Probably can't see us. We're up at a pretty high distance, but there is a LA County Sheriff's helicopter down pretty low, keeping an eye on the suspect, and then radioing forward to all the units in this vicinity as it continues southbound now on the 405 freeway headed towards the 118. If the suspect gets into that right lane, be able to transition onto the 118 freeway east or westbound. At this point, it's hard to say. And, the authorities can't use a spike strip in a situation like this, not when there's this many cars out on the roadway and not when the vehicle's traveling at this high rate of speed. It's nearly impossible to get into position to do that, but they do want to get this suspect. I don't think it's the type of pursuit where they'll just back off altogether and say, let this guy go, because he's wanted, apparently, at least as far as we know, on an assault on a sheriff's deputy. Whether that deputy was hurt or not, we don't know. We don't have any of that information. Whether he just tried to drive his vehicle towards the deputy, that's possible after a stop. That's pure speculation. We don't have that yet. But the suspect is continuing now on the 405 freeway southbound. We're headed down into the Granada Hills area, just south of the 118 freeway. Say it again, Jay. And so it appears the information that we have, possibly the suspect ran over the foot of a deputy after a routine traffic stop. That's the information we have as of now. Not specifically confirmed from the Sheriff's Department, but we do believe that that is the case or something along those lines. So this suspect, they're going to want to get, at this point in time, we don't have any information on that deputy either. Certainly being run over by a vehicle of that weight, it could crush your foot. You could have permanent damage. That's certainly possible, although you wouldn't think a wound like that would be life-threatening. We're still on the 405 freeway southbound. I believe we're coming up on Parthenia, if I'm not mistaken. Now onto the shoulder. And it's interesting when you see a suspect drive like this when there are no patrol cars behind the suspect. There's really no reason for that. Obviously, the suspect is aware, I believe, that the helicopter's overhead following them. But trying to get away from no cars, it's interesting why they would try and drive in this manner. They're coming up on, or the suspect's coming up on a little more traffic. It's moderate at best. The suspect will be able to continue without stopping, it looks, like on the 405 South until we get all the way down towards the Ventura Freeway. That's always a very crowded place there, and I understand Philip Palmer is going to be with me here in a moment as well. Philip? Yeah, I don't think so either, Philip. And it looks like you might be getting off onto Roscoe from the 405 freeway southbound. So everything changes now getting onto the surface streets as far as law enforcement is concerned, because they just had an air unit overhead. They backed off because of the high speeds, but now they're going to be radioing to more than likely LAPD units in this area. That's their jurisdiction as they enter Roscoe here.
There we go.
Up
wow.
onto the curb. Look at that. Really trying to get away. Up onto the shoulder, into the bushes. It's hard to tell if they may have hit somebody. That looks right there like they may have scraped that mirror, if I'm not mistaken. And now you see how desperate this suspect is to try and get away. And this is turning out to be an extremely dangerous pursuit. And now we're going to be back on the 405 freeway southbound. So not certain exactly what was going on there. Philip got off on Roscoe and then just got right back on the 405 south.
Well, and for a second, I mean, depending on the steepness of that incline, there's an officer right there. They're going to re-engage, but they could have flipped that vehicle, when they drive up there that quickly. I mean, it is, as you mentioned, probably an SUV Jeep Cherokee, so maybe it's not likely, but certainly it's a possibility, especially when you start accelerating like he did up on the slope there.
Yeah, no doubt. It certainly shows that we believe it's a male. From what we could tell, it appeared to be, but we didn't get confirmation of that.
True.
But certainly they're desperate to get away, Philip, and that's what makes these things so dangerous. Now back onto the freeway, and you see a lot of movement inside there also. I can't tell. You might be able to tell if that looked more like a man than a woman. I couldn't really tell. But what we have here on the freeway with them backing off.
Scott, I'm going to break in because we're going to break into television here real quickly. Actually, good morning to you. This is... Good morning. I'm Philip Palmer along with Scott Reif. We are breaking into coverage this morning a little bit before Eyewitness News at 11 a.m. with a police pursuit southbound. And this is on the 405. Scott Reif, we've watched just in the last few minutes as this person who is eluding authorities has started to take some real aggressive action in an attempt to escape.
Yeah, we've seen the speeds go up, too. I think we're going to get 100 miles an hour here real soon. We're on the 405 South in the Van Nuys area. Up ahead around the 101 freeway, I don't see too much traffic. So far, the suspect's been able to drive on the freeway at a high rate of speed without hitting anything that would slow him down. As you mentioned, it's going to be difficult for anyone out on the freeway to even know this is a pursuit. I'm going to open up out of the shot for just a moment. They did back off and went to surveillance mode, meaning only a helicopter overhead to track the vehicle. And it looks like that's still the case. We did hear some information they may re-engage, but we're not seeing that quite yet. But the suspect will be able to continue on the 405 freeway until he gets up into the Sepulveda Pass, where he starts to see some moderate traffic that could slow him down a bit. As far as how dangerous it is on the freeways, this helps a bit, Philip, when you don't have a lot of volume and you see a suspect doing, 75, 80, which is maybe only 10 miles an hour or so over the flow of traffic this time of the afternoon. So when we watch these things, we certainly want them to stay in the type of mode where nobody gets hurt or it's not a danger to everyone. We did see an erratic move there, though, and how desperate the suspect was when he got off onto Roscoe from the 405 South. For now, though, Philip content to just stay in the center lane just a little bit faster than the flow of traffic.
Well, and to let everybody know as we just go on to television what's been happening here, because some of this has been on our streaming channel. We've been talking about this for a few minutes now. This suspect, we believe, the reports are that they ran over the foot of a sheriff's deputy during a traffic stop, and so that deputy was injured. And now, of course, you have an assault on an officer, as well as everything that goes along with fleeing officers in pursuit right now. So surveillance mode primarily, but Scott, when the suspect here exited at Roscoe, they drove right by an officer, and it almost appeared as if they would engage at that moment. But for now, it does seem, I mean, you'll have a better view than us. It does seem as if this is primarily following from the air.
Yeah, it is in tracking mode right now. They don't have any units right behind this vehicle. They were behind them, and the suspect started to drive more erratically, swerving in and out of traffic, and I think they felt that they would back off just a little bit, and hopefully that would slow down the pace of the vehicle and actually how aggressive this suspect was driving. But you mentioned if it's assault with a deadly weapon, basically against a sheriff's deputy, we believe, they're not just going to let this guy go. You know, sometimes we'll see a vehicle that's pulled over for speeding, and if the guy just takes off, it gets too dangerous, they'll get the license plate and say, hey, we'll pick this guy up sometime else. In this situation, it doesn't look like that's going to be the case. They have an air unit overhead. We're on the 405 southbound. We're headed up the Sepulveda Pass, just crossing Ventura Boulevard up towards Valley Vista. We don't see extremely high rates of speed right now, and I think they're content, law enforcement at this point in time, to back off, watch the suspect from the air, because when he does get out of the vehicle or get off the freeway, they're going to get him. But you will see a lot of times, Philip, from time to time, you know, another patrol car on the shoulder, because CHP is in charge of this. They're making a lot of calls out there. They may have, you know, a patrol car or a cruiser on the shoulder of the freeway, trying to get a better idea when he drives by. If there are more people on board, maybe get a good look at the individual, see if that picture matches the person who's registered to the vehicle, those types of things.
Well, CHP, Scott, has confirmed now that it was the foot of a deputy they ran over during a traffic stop. So we had those reports. So we do know that. We also want to reiterate, you've said it a couple of times, we don't know if this is a male or a female suspect at this point. We are getting word now that the sheriffs are no longer considering this an assault on a police officer. Not sure why, but that is now what they are saying, that the sheriff is not considering this assault on an officer. So that is interesting. But Scott, here we go again. You know, yes, not at high rates of speed considering traffic, but driving on the shoulder. And we've seen them driving on the embankment. So this person clearly is driving dangerously. We've seen worse, of course, but yeah, this is something interesting.
And we're running into an issue that doesn't happen very often, but there's a vice presidential TFR. The vice president is in town, and they're on the west side, and they have what's called a TFR, temporary flight restriction, and we can't fly into that by no means. So we're on the 405 freeway, basically at Mulholland on the valley side, looking south. The suspect is driving southbound on the 405, headed down towards Getty Center Drive, and for the most part, we cannot follow. We just can't fly through that airspace. Now, the PD will be able to. They can get a discrete code, and they can follow along with this vehicle or on this suspect south on the 405. But, Philip, we cannot. So we'll keep this picture up as long as we can. But the flight restriction, because of the vice president's visit, does not allow us to fly into that airspace.
Well, we can see the suspect driving onto the shoulder. Maybe you will be able to take a different tack, navigate around, and we can pick you up on the southbound side of this. We're coming up on Eyewitness News at 11 a.m. here in just a few